Hello friends, so in continuation with my previous class, that is on the puerperium. Now in this class we are going to discuss the puerperal complications. But before going to start this class, so if you are liking my videos, so you can like or share and subscribe this channel for the more videos if you found it is like useful for you. So now we will start the class puerperal complications. So as we have already discussed what is puerperium. So puerperium is the that postnatal duration that start from the delivery of placenta or the birth process to the 6 weeks of after the delivery. So all the reproductive system, all the reproductive organs revert back to its pre-pregnant state. So we have given the terminology for this is involution, and if the all the reproductive systems are not, like if reproductive organs are not revert back to its pre-pregnant state, then we will call it as a subinvolution. Then next is what is subinvolution. Subinvolution, as we have already discussed, is a medical condition in which after the childbirth the uterus does not return to its normal size. But so the definition for this is when the involution is impaired or retarded, it is called subinvolution. The uterus is the most common organ affected by the subinvolution, as it is the most accessible organ to be the measured per abdomen. The uterus involution is considered clinically as the index to assess subinvolution. So, as I have already discussed in the previous class, in this in the involution or the puerperium, so the fundal height as well as the vaginal discharge along with the fever is the very important indicator for the early identification of the complications of the postnatal duration. Now the next is causes for this subinvolution or the puerperal complications is predisposing factors are first is grand multipara. So grand multipara is if the mother is delivering more than 5 kids or the mother is pregnant for more than 5 times, then we will call it as a grand multipara. So the all the health parameters are deteriorated in the grand multipara, and so this is also the one of the major cause. Then next is over distension of the uterus as in twins and hydramnios. That is also the one of the predisposing factor for the puerperal sepsis or the complications. Then the maternal ill health, if the mother health status is already compromised, so it will increases the chances of further complications. Then next is cesarean section. So we are creating a wound, so the chances of infection and the complications will be more. The next is prolapse of the uterus. So if the prolapse of the uterus, that is sterile cavity, and if that cavity is exposed to the environment, the chances of infections will increases. Then next is retroversion after the uterus becomes pelvic organ. The next is uterine fibroid is also the one of the important factor or predisposing factor for the subinvolution. Then next is what are the aggravating factors for this subinvolution or the puerperal complications. So aggravating factors are the retained products of conception. So retained products of conception is, so the as you all know, like blood medium is the best kind of culture for the growth and development of the bacteria. So if the mother is having inside the uterus retained bits of or the retained products of conceptors, so it will be the best medium for the growth of infections or the bacteria. So the chances of infection also increases. And next is uterine sepsis will also cause the endometritis. Endometritis is the what is endometritis. So in the comment section you all will write what is endometritis. Then next is factors that may cause the subinvolution. So what are the factors that may cause the subinvolution? That is persistent lochia, fresh bleeding, long labor, anesthesia, full bladder, and difficulty delivery, and retained placenta and infections are the factors that may cause the subinvolution. So why all these factors are cause subinvolution? Persistent lochia, so if the mother is not maintaining the proper hygiene, not frequently changing the pad, and continuously using the same pad for the 6 hours, 8 hours, 24 hours, so it will cause an infection and increases the chances of infection. Long labor, the babies, long labor, what we will do? For frequent per vaginal examination, and the mother amniotic membranes are also ruptured, so that more exposure to infections. The next is anesthesia. Anesthesia is like if we are giving the anesthesia, the uterine tone will also be not there, and bladder and bowel tone is also there, uterine tone is also relaxed, so it will increases the muscles relaxation and chances of infection. Full bladder will not provide the space for the uterine contractions and relaxation. Difficult delivery, where in difficult delivery we are doing the some interventions, for example forceps and vacuum application, that also increases the chances of infection. Retained placenta, already we have discussed, like very good medium for the growth and development of the bacteria. And last is infection. Then next is what are the symptoms of this subinvolution. So what are the symptoms? The condition may be asymptomatic. The predominant symptoms are abnormal lochia discharge, either excessive or the prolonged. So for how many days the normal lochial discharge will be there? For maximum 15 days. Then next is irregular or at times excessive uterine bleeding is there. Then irregular cramps, like pain in cases of retained products or rise of temperature in sepsis. The next is signs. So what are the signs? The uterine height is greater than the normal for the particular day of the puerperium. Normal puerperial uterus may be displaced by the full bladder or a loaded rectum. It feel boggy and softer. So I know in the previous class I have explained like how much is the daily decreasing in the fundal height, and why fundal height measurement is important, and how we are supposed to check the fundal height. So you all write in the comment section what is the significance of fundal height, how much is the normal fundal height, and what is the rate of decreasing in the fundal height. The next is management. So management for this is, if any infection we are suspecting, then the antibiotic in the endometritis. Then next is exploration of the uterus is retained in the retained products. So for what we are doing exploration? Dilatation and curettage, and dilatation and evacuation. Then next is ergometrin. So often prescribed to enhance the involution process by reducing the blood flow to the uterus, is of no value in the prophylaxis. So for the management is at, if the things will happen, so for the management of these problems we can do the management or antibiotics. All these are the very like last option. So before the for the preventive aspect, from the antenatal itself we can start the like good nutrition, good health checkup, and early identification of all these problems. So majority of problems we can prevent in the postnatal time. The next is nursing management. So what nursing management we can do for this? These clients encourage early ambulation in the postnatal period, will decreases majority of the complications. The next is daily evaluation of the fundal height and the documentation. So we can able to identify how much change takes place daily and what is the significance, early identification of the problems. So we are supposed to maintain and keep the record and record of all these things: daily fundal height, temperature, and the vitals. Then next is urinary complications in the puerperium. So these are the urinary complications present in the puerperium. First is urinary tract infection, second is retention of the urine, third is incontinence of urine, and fourth is the suppression of urine. So urinary tract infection is very much common. Second is retention is also very much common. Incontinence of urine, in interventions we are doing too much excessive stretching of muscles, and the suppression of urine due to the loss of bladder tone. All these complications can occur. So one by one we will discuss all these complications. So first is urinary tract infection. It is a more common cause of puerperal pyrexia. Then the incidence rate of urinary tract infection is 1 to 5% of all deliveries. The chances of urinary tract infections will be there. The infection may be the consequences of any of the following. So infection is caused by all these things if happen. So first is recurrence of previous cystitis or pyelitis. So if the mother is having previous history of cystitis or the bladder inflammation or pyelitis, so the chances of UTI will increases. Then the asymptomatic becomes overt. If the mother is previously having UTI, then in the postnatal time it may become symptomatic. And then next is infection contracted for the first time during the puerperium is due to. So if the mother is having first time infection in the postnatal time due to the effect of frequent catheterization either during labor or in the early puerperium to relieve retention of urine. So why, if the first time the infection is there, so What are the causes? In the second stage of labor or in the first stage of labor, we are emptying the bladder to widen the birth space. So with the help of rubber catheter, we are emptying the bladder. So that frequently, if we are doing or keep on inserting and the same catheter and maintaining the unhygienic conditions or not maintaining the sterile technique, it will increase the chances of infection or UTIs. And in the postnatal time, if the bladder tone is not there and we are emptying the bladder with the help of catheter for the, if the mother is having PPH, in that case, if we have frequent catheterization is the main cause, if the mother is having first time UTI. Then the stasis of urine during the early puerperium due to lack of bladder tone and less desire to pass urine may be due to the overstretching of muscles and may be due to the episiotomy wound. Then what are the organisms responsible for the urinary tract infection? So the main organisms responsible for this is E. coli, second is Klebsiella, Proteus, Staph aureus. Then what is the management for this is antibiotic. Along with the antibiotics, in excessive increasing in the fluid intake is also we can encourage to a mother. Then the next is retention of urine is the second complication. This is a common complication in the early puerperium. Then the causes of this is bruising and edema of the bladder neck. So due to the mild CPD or prolonged labor, so it will increases the bruising and edema of the bladder neck. So that is also the one of the cause for retention of urine. Then the reflex from the perineal injury. So if difficult labor or prolonged labor, we are applying or doing the interventions, for example forceps and the vacuum delivery, so that will also decreases the reflex. Then overstretching of the muscles or the perineal wound will also be one of the cause for retention of urine. Then the unaccustomed positions, and if the patient's position is not comfortable and patient is not willing to sit or not able to sit due to the episiotomy, that is also will cause the retention of urine. And if the mother is too much tired, she don't want to go to the washroom, that is also the one of the cause for retention of urine. Then next is treatment of retention of, so what we can do for the retention of urine management. First is, if simply measure fail to initiate maturation, an indwelling catheter is to be kept in situ for about 48 hours. So always in the first whenever after the delivery, we are keeping a mother in the immediate postnatal room. After the confirming of the bowel and bladder and the normal bleeding, then only we are shifting a mother to the postnatal ward. Then next is, if all these normal measures of stimulating the natural methods of stimulation, for example running a tap water, increasing the fluid intake, stimulating and giving putting a water or a lukewarm water on the perineal area. So all these measures will stimulate the maturation. And so if all these measures will fail, we are supposed to insert a indwelling or Foley's catheter for the 48 hours. Then next is, this is not only empties the bladder but helps in regaining the normal bladder tone and sensation of fullness. So in between, we are clamping the urinary catheter with the help of artery, so that will also make the regain, it is important for the regaining of the bladder tone. Then next is, appropriate urinary antiseptic should be administered for about 5 to 7 days. So some of the antibiotics or the antiseptic solutions we are inserting with the help of catheter, or usually we are giving for the douching, so it decreases the chances of infection also. Then incontinence of urine is also very much important complication in the postnatal time. So this is not a common symptom following birth. Incontinence may be overflow incontinence, stress incontinence, usually manifest in the late puerperium. So the patient is coming with the complaint of leaking of the urine while coughing. Then the true incontinence is a form of genitourinary fistula, usually appears soon following the delivery or within the first week of puerperium. Stress incontinence is established by noting the escape of urine through the urethral opening during the stress. The exact nature of the urinary fistula is established by noting the fistula site by examining the patient in Sims position using Sims speculum or by the 3 swab test if the fistula is tiny. The next is, what nursing management we can do for this incontinence. Then so first management is encourage urination early in the postnatal period. Then second is encouraging urination will make the bladder tone or the control over the or frequently passing the urine will make the mother more comfortable and helping in the regaining of the bladder tone. Then second is encourage to void every 2 to 4 hours. So we are encouraging a mother to pass the urine for every 2 to 4 hours. Then assist the mother to the bathroom or at the bedside or in a bedpan. Then next, to make the mother comfortable, the next intervention we can do is monitor intake and output. Then next is monitor for the monitor for the frequency and volume of urine. Then next is if the mother is unable to void, catheterize her. The next is monitor for any signs of infection of urinary tract. If any, report immediately. So if any of the complications will be there, we are supposed to report to the higher authority. So this is the one research article that is related to the urinary incontinence in pregnancy and puerperium. It's an prospective study. I think this is not needed in this class. Then second is suppression of urine. So what happen in the suppression of urine? If the 24 hours urine excretion is less than 400 ml or less than, then we are then for this condition we can tell it as a suppression of urine. Then what are the breast complications in the postnatal time? So these are the breast complications. First is breast engorgement, second is cracked and retracted nipple leading to difficulty in breastfeeding, then third is mastitis and breast abscess, and fourth is the lactational failure. So first is breast engorgement. Breast engorgement is we are expecting after the first 24 hours there is no milk production because estrogen and progesterone will make the prolactin resistant. So the prolactin will not come into action for the first 24 hours. So after the 24 hours the breast engorgement will be there and milk production started after the first 24 hours. So that breast engorgement is the complication which increases the body temperature for 0.5 degrees Celsius to the normal temperature. So engorgement is defined as the uncomfortable swelling of the breast associated with the increased milk secretion and usually occur from the second to fourth day of postnatal time. Then there may be a lymphatic and vascular congestion, possibly interstitial edema, causing swelling and tenderness. This exacerbation the tension of milk in the ducts and may cause stasis of the milk, resulting in inability of the milk to flow. This swelling and hardness may make it difficult for the baby to attach to the nipple and probably can be further aggravated by nipple soreness. The primiparous patient and the patient with inelastic breast are likely to be involved. Engorgement is an indication that the baby is not in the step with the stage of lactation. So best management for this breast engorgement is exclusive breastfeeding as soon as the mother is that after the delivery. So this is the best measurement we can give the counseling regarding wear a supportive bra and hot application, and the application of the cabbage leaves is also the very much effective in the management of breast engorgement. Then the onset is usually manifest after the milk secretion start second to fourth day postpartum. And what are the signs and symptoms for this breast engorgement? Considerably pain and feeling of tenderness or heaviness in the both breast. Generalized malaise is generalized body weakness. Other name for this is, and the next is raise in the body temperature, which is 0.5 degree then Celsius, and painful breastfeeding is there if the mother is having breastfeeding. Then next is prevention for this is avoid prelactal feed. So if we are giving any of the feed or or powder or the artificial feed to a baby, then baby is not accepting the feed. Then next is initiation of breastfeeding as early and unrestricted. So there are two methods of providing the breastfeeding, which is first is breastfeeding on demand, or the time like some of the mothers are giving whenever the baby cries, so they are giving the feed, and other is every 2 hours some mothers are giving. The next is exclusive breastfeeding on the demand. The next is feeding in the correct position is also one of the very much important factor for the prevention of breast engorgement. Then next is management of breast engorgement. So what we can do for the management of breast engorgement: administer analgesics to relieve pain. Second is the baby should be put to breast at regular intervals, so that there is less collection of blood, there is less collection of milk in the ducts. The next is manual expression of any remaining milk after each feed. So if any milk is remaining inside the breast, so we are instructed to mother to express that milk. Next is in severe cases the breasts are emptied by the expressing them manually or by the breast pump. So nowadays so many commercial breast pumps are available. So if the mother is not able to do the emptying the blood, we can suggest all these breast pump. Then next is elevate the breast by supporting the breast. So or the supportive bra, we can suggest for the well supported bra or well fitting bra to a postnatal mother. Then the next complication in the postnatal breast complication in the postnatal time is cracked and retracted nipple. So the cracked nipples is the nipple may becomes painful due to loss of surface epithelium, the formation of a raw area on the nipple due to a fissure or situated either at the tip or base of the nipple. So too much dryness or excessive dryness nearby the nipple will cause a cracked nipple. So before starting from the time, we can suggest the proper moisturization of the breast or nipples. And there is we are supposed to instruct to a mother to not to apply a soap on the black area of the breast, because it will cause the cracked nipple, and application of breast milk over the nipple, so it will prevent the chances of cracked nipples. Then next is it is caused by unclean hygiene, result in the formation of crust over the nipple. Next is retracted nipples, and next is trauma from the baby's mouth due to incorrect attachment to the breast. So we can tell the proper breastfeeding techniques or the breastfeeding positions to a mother, like complete black portion should be inside the mouth and the lips should be everted. Then the next is the condition may be asymptomatic but becomes painful when the infant sucks. So that breast cracked nipple is very much painful situation for a mother. Then what is a prophylaxis for this is local cleanliness during pregnancy, puerperium before and after each breastfeeding to prevent crust formation over the nipple. And in some of the hospitals I have seen, like they are keeping a wet gauze or a wet mopping cloth over the breast, so it will loosen that crust and we can remove that crust with the help of cotton or a gauze piece. The next is treatment for this. Correct attachment will provide immediate relief from the pain and rapid healing. Then the next is purified lonin with mother's milk is applied 3 to 4 times a day to has in healing. When it is severe, mouth should use a breast pump and infants fed the express milk. So if the condition is too much severe, the mother should express the breast milk, and we can provide that breast milk to a baby. Other one is nowadays so many commercial things, for example breast shield is also there, so we can use that also. Inflamed nipple areola may be due to the thirst also. The next is meconazole. If the thirst is there, meconazole lotion is applied over the nipple as well as in the baby's mouth. If there is oral thirst, it will be there. So in oral thirst there is white patches over the baby's tongue. If it fails to heal up, rest is given to the affected nipple using a breast pump while the nipple heal. So if there is too much things is present, so we can use the breast pump and we can express the milk and provide to a baby. The next is the persistence of a nipple ulcer in spite of therapy mentioned, need biopsy to be exclude malignancy. So if nipple ulcer is there for too long and then we are not able to manage that thing with the medicines, and so so for the diagnostic test for this is we can do the biopsy to exclude the malignancy. The next is retracted and the flat nipple. So it attracted and flat nipple, as in while we are doing the antenatal or during the antenatal visits, we are able to, like, it's a responsibility to identify the flat nipples and retracted nipple and give the appropriate proper counseling for the slight breast massage in the last trimester, because if we are suggesting the first 2 trimesters, it will stimulate the oxytocin and it will start the premature or preterm labor. So always give the counseling for the flat nipples and retracted nipple in the last trimester to do the light massage of the breast with the help of some moisturizer. So it is commonly met in primary gravida, usually present in the primary gravida, and it is usually acquired, and the babies are able to attach to the breast correctly and are able to suck adequately. In difficult cases, manual expression of milk can initiate lactation. Then next is gradually breast tissue becomes soft and more productile so that feeding is possible. So as a healthcare professional, so many measures we are taking for the making the nipples productile. You, for example, is cutting the syringe from the front and making a reverse syringe to provide a negative pressure over the nipples, so the nipples will be more prominent. And as a preventive measure in the last trimester, we can suggest the breast massage or of the nipples. The next is mastitis is also the one of the major complication in the postnatal time. So mastitis is defined as inflammation of the mammary glands. Then what is the incidence rate of this in mastitis? 2 to 5% in lactative and less than 1% in the non-lactating women. So the first complication in the breast is breast engorgement. So breast engorgement, if we are not doing the proper management for breast engorgement, it will lead to the mastitis, and if we are not taking the take care of the or proper management of mastitis, it will lead to the breast cancer in the later ages. So the mastitis is of 2 types. First is mammary cellulitis, inflammation of the connective tissue between lobes in the breast. Another type is mammary adenitis, infection in the lobes and ducts of the breast. The next is etiology, milk stasis and cracked nipples, which contribute to the influx of skin flora and the underlying factors associated with the development of mastitis. So if there is crack in the nipple, so normal skin flora will go inside into the circulation and will cause a major infection. Mastitis is also associated with primiparity, incomplete emptying of the breast, and the improper nursing techniques. So if the mother is not if the mother is doing the improper breastfeeding techniques or using breastfeeding techniques, it will also cause the mastitis. And if the mother is frequently changing the without completely emptying the one breast, the mother is starting the feeding from another breast, so the incomplete emptying of the breast will also cause the mastitis. Then next is the most common causative organisms include Staphylococcus aureus, Staphylococcus epidermidis, Saprophyticus, and Streptococcus viridans and E. coli. All these are the causative organs for the mastitis. Then the mode of infection is there are 2 types of mastitis depending upon the site of infection. Then first is infection that involve the breast parenchyma tissue leading to cellulitis. The lacteal system remains unaffected. Then the second is infections gain access through the lactiferous duct leading to development of primary mammary adenitis. Then next is non-infective mastitis may be due to milk stasis. Feeding from the unaffected breast solve the problem. Then the onset of this mastitis is acute during the late first week of puerperium, whereas in mammary adenitis the onset is insidious and usually occur near the end of the first week. Now what are the clinical features for the mastitis? First is generalized malaise and headache. Second is fever, chills, myalgia, erythema, warm swelling or breast tenderness. Then next is presence of toxic features. The next is presence of wedge-shaped swelling on the breast with its apex at the nipple. Then the overlying skin is red, hot and flushed and feel tense and tender. Then what are the morbidity and mortality factors related to all these? Neglected resistance and recurrent infections can lead to the development of an abscess requiring parenteral antibiotics and surgical drainage. And if we are not taking care of the mastitis in the early stage, then there is need of parenteral antibiotics and surgical drainage is required, because the formation of abscess due to the accumulation of milk in the breast. Then the abscess development complications, 5 to 11% of the cases of postpartum mastitis, and should be suspected when the antibiotic therapy fails. And mastitis and breast abscess also increases the risk of viral transmission from mother to infant. The diagnosis of mastitis is solely based on the clinical pictures. So if we are not doing the proper management for the abscess, then it will transmit the infection to the baby also. So the physical examination focuses on the vital signs, review of the system, and a complete examination of to look for other source of infection. Typically finding include an area of the breast that is warm, red and tender. When the exam reveals a tender, hard, possibly fluctuant mass with the overlying erythema and breast abscess should be considered. So all these are things we are supposed to do the proper monitoring where we can do for early identification of the things. The next is how we are supposed to do the diagnosis of this complication. So no laboratory tests are required for this. Express milk can be sent for analysis, but the accuracy and the reliability of these results are controversial and aid little in the diagnosis and treatment of mastitis. So there are some common features will be there, for example fever and all these things. So what treatment we can do for the management of this? So first is prophylactic management we can do. So prophylactic management is for the prevention of complication. So encourage mother to wash her hands before each feed, so it will prevent the chances of infection to baby as well as to the breast, because the mother is dealing with the breast and baby at the time of feeding. And encourage to clean the nipple before and after each feed, reduces the nosocomial infection rates. Then next is after the occurrence of this problem of mastitis, we can do the curative management. For this, provide breast support with the well supported bra. Then next is encourage to take plenty of oral fluids so that the infection can flush out. The next is encourage the mother to continue the breastfeeding with good attachment, so it will decreases the chances of cracked nipple or the chances of mastitis or complete emptying of the bladder, complete emptying of the breast. So if complete emptying of the breast is there is no remaining milk is the inside, and the chances of mastitis also decreases. The next is nursing is established first on the affected side and to the established let down. Then the infected side is emptied manually with the each feed. Then fluoxetine or penicillin is the drug of choice. Erythromycin is the alternative drug of choice who are allergic to penicillin for the cure of the infection. The next is antibiotic therapy is continued for at least 7 days, and the next is analgesics are given for the management of pain. Then the next complication is breast abscess. Features as flushed breast, not responding to antibiotics promptly, browny edema of the overlying skin, and marked tenderness with the fluctuation, swinging temperature. So sometimes temperature increases, sometimes decreases, so that we will call it as a swinging temperature. Then the management for this is drain the abscess under the general anesthesia, so that draining of the abscess we can do for the management. The next is encourage the breastfeeding on the unaffected side. Then the next is the infected breast is pumped every 2 hours and with every letdown, so that we cannot provide the medium for the growth. So complete emptying of the breast milk from the affected side every 2 hours. As a healthcare professional, we are supposed to encourage to a patient. Then next is once cellulitis is resolved, breastfeeding from the uninvolved side may be resumed. Then next is breast pain. So for the breast pain, candid albicans is a common cause for the breast pain. Then the risk factors for this breast pain is diabetes mellitus, oral thirst of infection, and the treatment. For the treatment we can do is use of meconazole oral lotion or gel into both the nipples after each feed and into the infant's mouth thrice daily for the 2 weeks if we are expecting oral thirst in the baby's mouth. Then the lactational failure or inadequate milk production, if there, then what are the causes? First is infrequent suckling. So if more sucking is there, more stimuli to the cerebral cortex, hypothalamus, anterior pituitary, posterior pituitary, and the secretion of prolactin. So if more stimuli is there, more secretion of prolactin, more formation of milk. And if the mother is not properly feeding, if there is insufficient feeding, it will decrease the lactation failure. Then next is depression or anxiety state in the puerperium will also cause lactation suppression. Then next is reluctance or apprehension to nursing. So if we are not taking all the, like, mother is not confident enough and she's thinking like breastfeeding is not a good thing, or any of the negative feeling, or if we are not making the, like, appreciating a mother, so it will also cause the or anxiety will also cause the lactation failure. The next is ill development of nipples. So if there is retracted or flat nipples, so the baby is not able to suck, so that is also the one of the cause for lactation failure. The next is painful breast lesions. If there are, for example, cracked nipple, so nipple also will cause lactation failure. The next is endogenous suppression of prolactin. Retained placental bits will not like, if there is some retained placental bits, so there is less uterine contraction, less oxytocin, so that is also the one of the endogenous suppression for the prolactin. The next is prolactin inhibition is due to the estrogen and progesterone for the first 2 days will make the prolactin resistant. Then the management for this is, in the antenatal time, counsel the mother regarding the advantages of nursing or the breastfeeding her baby with the breast milk. Take care of any breast abnormality, especially a retracted nipple, and maintain adequate breast hygiene, especially in the first 2 months of pregnancy. Then next, during the puerperal time, encourage adequate fluid intake, nurse the baby regularly, or exclusive breastfeeding every 2 hourly, or feeding on the demand. The next is treat the painful local lesions. The next is metoclopramide, sulfide, or a bromide have been found to increase the bromide we are giving as an antagonist for the suppression of breast milk, but metoclopramide we are giving for the increasing in the milk production. The other name for metoclopramide is Perinom. 3 times a day we are giving for the increasing the breast milk. Nowadays so many granules are also present that we are giving with the milk, that will also increases the milk production. Then the next is nursing diagnosis: altered comfort, pain related to infection and inflammation in the breast, the anxiety related to client inability to continue breastfeeding. The next is altered parenting related to client's inability. हम तो कल खा लिया
एक बार कैसे नमक दिया तू दिया ही काला कंद खा गई काय काय करे कुछ करे तो
ना
आपा तो खाती ना अंदर
ले गया घर 3 सहेली थी, उनके किससे ले देती।
मजे कीजिए कपड़ा डाल दो
So these are the nursing diagnosis for the management of breast complications. So first, already I have discussed altered comfort related to infection and inflammation in the breast. Second is, so for the pain management we can do the hot compression, manual expression of the breast milk, encouraging a mother for the frequent breastfeeding and the exclusive breastfeeding, and for instructing for the wearing of well supported bra. Then the second is anxiety related to the client's inability to continue breastfeeding. So for the anxiety management, proper support, counseling, and breast counselors are also there nowadays. So encouraging a mother for the relieving of that anxiety, encouraging to clear the doubts and talk to doctors, and if mother is any feeling any of the anxiety situations, ask the questions. So all these will relieve the anxiety. The next nursing diagnosis is altered parenting related to the client's inability to continue breastfeeding. So for that also the same things we can do, the counseling or the encouraging a mother for the breastfeeding. Then at last is knowledge deficit related to the care of the breastfeeding techniques. So for that also we are supposed to provide the proper and education to a mother. Then next thing is uh, all these are the nursing diagnosis. So planning and interventions already we have discussed for this problem is explain about the breast care and breastfeeding techniques, instruct the mother on the sign and symptoms or the early identification of the problem, inspect nipple for any crack and soreness, because early management we can with the early management we can prevent the complications, provide warm application to relieve the pain, administer antibiotics. The next is puerperal venous thrombosis. So what is puerperal venous thrombosis? Thrombosis of the leg vein is one of the common and important complications in the puerperium, especially in the western countries. So for the diagnosis for this, like if we want to identify this early identification of thrombotic complications in the legs, we can check the Homan sign. So we are tightly holding the calf muscles and making the complete flexion of the leg. So if the pain is there in the calf muscles, it means the Homan sign is positive, and if no pain is there in the calf muscles, it means the mother is not at the risk of venous thrombosis formation. The Homan sign is negative. The next is venous thrombosis embolic disease included deep vein thrombosis, thrombophlebitis, septic pelvic thrombophlebitis, and the pulmonary embolus. So etiopathogenesis for this is alterations in the blood constituents, because as we have already discussed, like what are the blood composition changes takes place in the antenatal time and what changes takes place in the postnatal time. Then venous stasis is increased due to the compression of gravid uterus to the inferior vena cava and iliac veins. The stasis is called damage to the cells. So due to the overweight or the weight of the gravid uterus over the femoral veins or on the veins, so it will cause the venous stasis. So thrombophlebitis are the hypercoagulated states in the pregnancy that increases the risk of venous thrombosis. It may be inherited and acquired. And inherited thrombophlebitis are the genetic conditions associated with the deficiencies of antithrombin 3, protein C, protein S, and others are the factor 5 mutations. Then the acquired are due to the presence of lupus, anticoagulant and antiphospholipid antibiotics. Other acquired risk factors for the thrombosis are advanced age and parity. Second is operative deliveries, 10 times more chances of venous thrombosis. If the mother is having any obesity, anemia, heart disease, infection, pelvic cellulitis, trauma to the venous wall, so all these things will increase the chances of venous thrombosis. Then for the next is deep vein thrombosis. So for the diagnosis of deep vein thrombosis, we can do the clinical diagnosis unreliable. Its majority is remain asymptomatic, but Doppler we can do, or the checking of Homan sign we can do for the early identification. Then the symptoms include pain in the calf muscles as we are checking in the Homan sign, edema in the legs, prominent leg veins, risk in the rising in the skin temperature. On examination, asymmetric leg edema, differences in the circumference between the affected and the normal leg more than 1 centimeter is significant. And next is positive Homan sign, pain in the calf muscles or on the dorsiflexion of the foot will be present, as we have already discussed, like what is Homan sign. The next is investigation for this deep vein thrombosis. The following biophysical tests are employed to confirm the diagnosis. So first test we can do is Doppler ultrasound to detect changes in the velocity of blood flow in the femoral vein. So normal flow to that area we are checking with the help of Doppler ultrasound. The next is venography by injecting a non-ionic water soluble radiopaque dye to note the filling defect in the venous lumen. The next is pelvic thrombophlebitis. So postpartum thrombophlebitis or originate in the thrombosed vein at the placental site by organisms such as aerobic, streptococci and the bacteroides fragiles. So when localized in the pelvic, it is called pelvic thrombophlebitis. There is no specific clinical features of pelvic thrombophlebitis, but it should be suspected in case where pyrexia continue more than a week in spite of antibiotic therapy. Then we are suspecting a pelvic thrombophlebitis. Then the extrapelvic spread is through the right ovarian vein into the inferior vena cava and to the lungs through the left ovary vein in the left renal vein and then to the left kidney. Retrograde extension to iliofemoral veins to produce the clinical pathological entities to Phylogomycia albulonans and white lag. Phylogomycia albulonans is white lag. It is a clinical pathological condition usually caused by retrograde extension in pelvic thrombophlebitis to involve the iliofemoral vein, and the femoral vein may be directly affected by adjacent cellularity. The condition is seldom met nowadays. So what happened? So like remain like whatever the ovarian veins or the uterine veins are connected to the main vena cava, or that circulation will go to the lungs. So it will spread to the extra, like that will spread to the from the femoral vein to the other organs will transmit. So it will lead to the extra pelvic transmission or the extra pelvic spread of this thrombus. Then what are the clinical features for it? Is usually develop on the second week of the puerperium. Then this mild pyrexia is there. At the times the fever may be high with the chills and the rigors. The next is third is clinical feature is evidence of constitutional disturbances such as headache, malaise and rising pulse rate. And the next is the affected leg swollen, painful and white and cold. The pain is due to the atrial spasm as a result of irritation from the nearby thrombus vein. Blood count show polymorph nuclear leukocytes. The next is diagnosis may be made by ultrasound, computer tomography, CT scan or by the magnetic resonance MRI. Then the prophylaxis for venous thrombosis is in pregnancy and puerperium. So preventing measures include prevention of trauma, sepsis, anemia in pregnancy and labor. Dehydration during delivery should be avoided because over dehydration or too much dehydration will cause hemoconcentration, so that will also increase the chances. So the use of elastic compression stocking in intermittent pneumatic compression devices during surgery will decreases the chances. Leg exercise, early ambulation are encouraged following operative deliveries. So women at risk of venous thromboembolic during the pregnancy have been grouped into different categories depending on the presence of risk factor. Thromboprophylaxis to such a woman depends on the specific risk factor and the categories. So first categories, a low risk woman has a no personal or family history of venal thrombosis embolism and are heterozygous for factor 5 linear mutation, such as woman needs no thromboprophylaxis. Then the second category is a high risk woman in one who has the previous venous embolism is present in present pregnancy or antithrombin in deficiency, such as woman needs low molecular weight heparin prophylaxis throughout pregnancy and postpartum 6 weeks. Women with antithrombin 3 deficiency can be treated with antithrombin 3 concentrated prophylaxis. So there are two categories which required for the thromboprophylaxis therapy. One is low risk, those who have no family history or no mutation, so they no need to require any treatment. Then the second is high risk women, those who having this deficiency also and the thrombin deficiency also. So for that we are giving the low molecular therapy in the antenatal time as well as in the 6 weeks postnatal time. Then the management for this is the patient is put to be bed rest with the foot and raised above the heart level. Then second management is pain on the affected area may be relieved with the analgesics, but no hot applications or no massaging we are supposed to do on the affected side because it will dislodge that clot. Then third is appropriate antibiotics are supposed to be administered. Then fourth is anticoagulant therapy for dissolving of that clot and to prevent the further formation of the clots in the veins. Then heparin is continued for at least 7 to 10 days or even longer if the thrombosis is severe, prolongation of activation or for the prolongation of the APTT time to 1.5 to 2.5 time. But if the APTT time is more than 90 seconds, then we are supposed to stop that therapy. Exoparin 40 mg daily is given. It is not we are giving because it will not cross the placenta. Then second drug of choice is a drug of coumarin series. Varfarin is commonly used orally with an overlap of at least 3 days with heparin. The initial daily single dose of 7 mg for 2 days is adequate for induction. Subsequent maintenance dose depends upon the INR time, so which should be within the range of 2 to 3. The daily maintenance dose for varfarin usually 5 to 9 mg to be taken at the same time each day. Then the next is the anticoagulant therapy should be continued till all the evidence of disease have been disappeared, which generally take 3 to 6 months. Neither anticoagulant should be prevented the mother from breastfeeding. So as soon as pain subsides, gently movement is allowed on the bed by the end of the first week. Then the high quality elastic stocking are fitted on the affected leg before mobilization. Then the sixth is vena cava filters are used for the patient with recurrent pulmonary embolism or where anticoagulant therapy is contraindicated. Then seventh is fibrinolytic agents like streptokinase produce rapid resolution of pulmonary emboli. And eighth is venous thrombectomy is needed for massive ileohumeral vein thrombosis for the massive pulmonary embolus. But before using this fibrinolytic agents or the anticoagulants, we are always supposed to monitor the clotting parameters, for example APTT, INR and the clotting time, because the chances of bleeding is more if the patient is taking all these medicines. Then this is the one research evidence for this, so I think this is not required in this class. Then the next complication is pulmonary embolism. So pulmonary embolism is the leading cause of maternal death in the many centers, especially in the developed countries, after the sharp declining in the maternal mortality due to hemorrhage, hypertension and sepsis. While deep vein thrombosis in the leg, in the pelvic is most likely the cause of pulmonary embolism, but it is about 80 to 90%. It occurs without any previous clinical manifestation of TVT. The predisposing factors are those already mentioned in the venous thrombosis. So the clinical features depend on the size of the embolus and the preceding health status of the patient. The classical symptoms of massive pulmonary embolism are sudden collapse with acute chest pain and air hunger. Death usually occur within short time for shock and vagal inhibition. The important signs and symptoms of pulmonary embolism are: first is tachypnea. That is, what is tachypnea? Tachypnea is increasing in the pulse rate. Then next is dyspnea, difficulty in breathing. Then next is pleuritic chest pain or sudden chest pain. And then next is cough, tachycardia and hemoptysis, rise in temperature more than 37 degrees Celsius. And the diagnosis we can do with the help of X-ray, with the help of ECG, then ABG analysis we can do, Doppler ultrasound we can do, lung scan we can do, then pulmonary angiography we can do for the diagnosis of this thing. Then the management what we can do is prophylaxis as mentioned in the venous thromboembolism. So anticoagulant therapy we can do, or we can give. Active treatment includes resuscitation, so cardiac massage we can do, oxygen therapy we can do, intravascular heparin bolus dose of 5000 international unit, and morphine 15 mg IV are started. Heparin therapy is to be continued up to 40,000 international unit per day, so to maintain the clotting time to over 12 minutes for the first 48 hours, and heparin level is maintained at 0.2 to 0.4 units per ml of the activated partial thromboplastin time or APTT time, about twice the normal. Then second thing we can do is IV fluid support to continue, and blood pressure is maintained if the needed by dopamine or adrenaline. Then third thing we can do is thrombolytic therapy. Streptokinase with a loading dose of 6 lakhs international unit we can give and continue to 1 lakh international per hour. It does not cross the placenta when used during the pregnancy. But whenever we are using all these anticoagulant therapy, we are supposed to monitor all the clotting time or bleeding time, INR or APTT time, because the chances of bleeding is more with all these therapy. Then the tachycardia is counteracted by digitalis. We can give the digitalis for the management of tachycardia. Recurrent attacks of pulmonary embolism necessitate surgical treatment like embolectomy, placement of vena cava filter, or ligation of inferior vena cava adovariation veins. Surgical treatment is also done following the pulmonary angiography. Thanks. So all these are the complications of puerperium or the postnatal duration. So if you like my video, you can share, subscribe and press the bell icon, so you will get the notifications of the future video or the new videos. Thanks for watching my video.